Of all the things I've seen patients die from, this is probably the most insidious. My wife almost died, my dog died, my son was sick with rashes and fevers. Mold can kill you. 50% of homes and buildings in the USA alone are water damaged. Mold is like the perfect storm. Your body won't work if you're not doing these 6 things.
Dr. Peter Osborne, it is so wonderful to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Talk to me about mold, because you've done a deep dive into this the last couple of years. Why is mold so scary? Why are people missing it? How can they discover this faster if it's a problem in their health?
Mold is like the perfect storm, only microscopically, so you can't see it. Imagine a tornado full of toxins, mold fragments, volatile organic compounds, mycotoxins, swirling through the air in your home. And all of our homes are built with such tight energy efficiency. And what happens is your air starts to poison you, but it's the analogy of being in the hot water and turning the temperature up slowly over time. So symptoms manifest largely as accelerated aging, which for many people it's, what do they hear from their doctor? You're getting older. This is normal. It's in your head. Let's refer you to this person because they don't want to really treat them. So they refer them out to the ologist team, the rheumatologist, the cardiologist, the endocrinologist, et cetera.
This is just unconscionable to me because it's so easily measured. Why are doctors missing this? Why are they letting their patients down like this?
Lack of knowledge. I've interviewed over 30 doctors who medical trained. And unfortunately, not a single one of them had any type of training in school. So their mold training in school stops at mold infections like mucor or aspergillosis that can kill you. So we know mold can kill you, but their training stopped there, and they're not trained to identify. They're trained to diagnose and treat, right? Like give it a name, give it a drug.
Right.
And that's fine, but if you want to get better, it doesn't work, right? That's why we have 70 years of that type of medicine failing us all. $4 trillion a year we spend, and we're the sickest country in the world. And mold as a factor is so important because people spend 90% of their time indoors, and houses are tight and they're being built incorrectly. We've got corrupt builders, corrupt attorneys, we've got corrupt inspectors, and mold has become a massive problem. The EPA the EPA recognizes that 50% of homes and buildings in the USA alone are water damaged, and that there's an estimation that 80% of them in some cases are water damage and or have mold. And there have been a number of other studies even across Europe. So it's not just a US problem alone. So people think, oh, you go to Europe and it's better. Yeah, they have better construction, but they still have moisture problems in their construction. And when you have moisture, you have mold. Mold's job is to return things back to the earth, and that includes your home and that includes your body. So what we don't want is that swirling hurricane of toxins in our airspace where we're trying to sleep and heal and repair and live and have a life. So it's an under-recognized problem because there's no training. And it's the perfect storm because people don't want to believe their homes are poisoning them. So there's almost like a denialism. There's a denialism from medicine. There's a denialism from insurance. There's a denialism from the patients. And if one person in mold is sick, out of 4 people that live in the home, there's a denialism from the family members. And so you have all of this creating this perfect opportunity at sucking the life force out of the unfortunate victims who are being exposed.
That's what happened to me. Mold absolutely ruined my life. And I didn't realize it. I had spent some time in childhood in a moldy bedroom. I was becoming more and more sensitive, more and more reactive. Life was harder. My temperament was changing. It was one of a few factors. But it wasn't until I lived in moldy house after moldy house, and the car was moldy because they had a leaky seal. Like there was nowhere to get away from these multiple exposures of poison. And then even when I got told that finally that mold could be an issue, it didn't even occur to me that it was my issue, which is just so weird. Yeah. How are people missing this in their homes, and what should they look for?
The easiest way to assess for risk, there are a couple of things. Number one, you should get really familiar with the term hygrometer. these read humidity levels in your home. Sometimes your humidity should really ideally be below 50% in your home. Between 40 and 50% is a really good place for mold prevention. If you're sitting at 60, 70%, if you're trying to save money by not running your air conditioner, the air conditioner is designed to dehumidify the air when it runs. What happens is humidity levels build, and you don't need a pipe burst. You don't need running water to grow mold. You just need vapor. So get hygrometers in your bedrooms. You can get them for $6. They're real inexpensive ways to kind of monitor. If you suspect you have mold, very inexpensively, you can do a type of dust collection called an ERMI test. And ERMI is just basically it analyzes for mold spores in the dust samples of your home. And that can give you at least a window of what kinds of molds are there and quantitatively how much, because at certain levels, mold is okay, but at other levels, it is not. So those two things are kind of preliminary. They're not definitive, they're preliminary. You really want to know if you struggle with autoimmune disease, if you struggle with the signs of chronic aging, your eyes are going, your joints hurt, regardless of the fact that you haven't really injured anything, your brain is slipping, your brain foggy, you can't word recall very well. You're getting electrostatic shocks when you walk through your house. You're developing nerve stings or nerve pain or neuropathy. These are super common symptoms of mold exposure. So if you fall in that umbrella, you can do an ERMI, you can get hygrometers, but ultimately see a mold literate doctor, somebody that's trained or understands mold really, really well, because there's some simple tests that a doctor can run. One of the most simple tests is a urine test that will measure for the toxins in your body that molds produce. And that's another really great way to understand, is this playing a role potentially in your health issue? Because once that's identified, there's a step 2 to that process. Now you need to go the extra mile and do a mold inspection of your house. Mold can hide in the walls. I've seen cases where, I just had a case where not one inkling of visible mold. It was growing behind the wall, behind the laundry room where the water goes into the wall. There was a leak, and it wasn't an obvious leak where water was all over the floor. So they pulled the washing machine back, and they saw some wet, slimy, black stuff, and they were sick for years.
Yeah.
And this was in a home that had largely been rebuilt and remodeled. So don't think because your house is new that you're safe. Don't think because you bought a house that's been brand new remodeled that you're safe. There are mistakes, construction mistakes, that are very common that allow for moisture accumulation, water buildup, and that can lead to mold growth, the invisible kind. When I lost my house to mold, we had 1 million spore count in our wall cavities, but we didn't have any visible mold that was obvious. So a good mold inspector, and a key note there, if you hire a mold inspector and they come out and they do an outside air sample and an indoor air sample, get them out of your house and fire them. Air testing for mold is the equivalency of a doctor running a CBC on a chronically sick patient and saying, you're just fine. Air testing is a tool, and it can find mold, but more commonly it does not, especially black mold, because those spores are super heavy and they fall to the floor. They don't circulate up in the air. The other problem with air tests is most people that are trained to do them have a weekend certificate. They don't know about mold illness. They're coming into your house, they turn off the air conditioner and everything is still. And then they take their air sample. Well, mold spores circulate when you walk across the floor. It's kind of the way dust kicks up. And if you're taking a still air picture, you're getting a false potential message. Some believe you need a 20-inch box fan to stir things up to be able to properly do an air test. But don't stop at the air test. A true mold inspection will include an air test. It will include humidity readings, thermal cameras, fiber optic cameras that can be placed behind the walls to do visualization. They should crack open your HVAC and look at your coils to make sure there's no mold growing on your coils. Should go in your attic if you have one. They should go in your crawl space if you have one. They should walk the perimeter of your house to look for signs of water intrusion or water damage. So very comprehensive. If you get a mold inspection report and it's 1 to 3 pages long, you haven't had a mold inspection, you've had an inadequate inspection. You've had a fake inspection, if you will. So definitely you want that good one if you're trying to rule it out, because what we see People get these 3-page inspections. They come to my office all the time. I read the inspection. I'm like, you haven't had a mold inspection. And they think they're out of mold and that they're home free and their mycotoxin levels in their urine are sky high. And ultimately, when you get a good inspector to go out to the home, typically you can find it relatively easy. You just have to know the difference, right? It's just like there's good and bad in every profession. If you hire a bad plumber, you won't rehire them. You got to go find one that's good. It's the same thing in mold inspection. You got to find the people that have great reputations and know what they're doing.
Could not agree more. Also, my least favorite thing is to see a mold remediator provide the only inspection, because there's just an inherent conflict of interest. And it's not to disparage remediators. We need you. We need you to be great at your job. When you're the one that's deciding how big that bill should be, that should be a dispassionate third party.
Well, it's just like when you go to a doctor. Oftentimes, if it's a big health issue, you seek a second opinion, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And with remediation companies, they should never be held to judge their own work. It's not to say they couldn't do a good job, but your mold inspector, your high quality mold inspector, is kind of your liaison that goes to bat for you to ensure that you not only know where the mold is at, but know why the mold grew. And from those two pieces of information to create a remediation plan for the remediator to follow. The remediator should not be making their own plan up. The mold inspector does that, and the remediator follows along the lines of what the mold inspector is asking. And then when it's all done, the mold inspector comes back out to corroborate that the work was done so that the family that was mold stricken can move back in a safe fashion with confidence.
One of the most frustrating things that I've found for folks is it takes them too long to even get to this topic, because there might be a family of 5 and they're all not feeling at their best, but it presents differently. So mom might have difficult periods and joint pain. A kiddo might have, childhood asthma. And another one might have, all kinds of different histamine sensitivities, skin rashes, etc., but no apparent lung issues. Dad might be depressed, and feeling like he's aging rapidly and not sleeping well. There's so many different presentations to mold illness. Can you speak to that a little bit from a clinical perspective?
Yeah, of course. It's a tragedy, really, that mold is such a hydra, because it can manifest in different ways for different people. At its core, it causes inflammation, and different people have different weaknesses. They're going to manifest that inflammation in different tissues. And when mom, who's usually in charge of the health of the family, right, when she starts getting nervous, worried, she's taking everybody to doctors and making sure the husband goes to see his doctor. And what's happening is they're all getting a diagnosis, right? You have asthma, here's your steroid inhaler. You have eczema, here's your steroid cream. You have depression, here's your antidepressant. So they're getting the pill for the diagnosis, but the diagnosis is wrong, because the way our system works is, and this is the way insurance works, unfortunately, is they're going to pay your insurance bill if you have a formal diagnosis. They're going to pay for your medication if that diagnosis matches the medication, right? And it's a excuse my language, it's a shitty system, and it hasn't worked, and it's failed us so horribly. But what happens is people get stuck in that, and they think, I have hypothyroidism, I have eczema.
Right.
It's kind of like my McDonald's. They start owning their illness as if it's special to them. And
as if it's part of their identity. Yeah.
Yes.
That's when I got told I would never be well. Well, Lyme disease, very easy for me to resolve once I resolved the mold. I had been financially devastated by trying to tackle Lyme directly without including that mold piece.
Tackle all the underlying factors. Mold typically is one that's very common, that's often overlooked. And don't get stuck in that route of take the pills to suppress your symptoms, because ultimately what happens, it's another area that very few people talk about, drugs don't come free. Now, and I'm not talking financially free. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul. You can't trick your body to mask your symptoms by suppressing something without paying a price somewhere else.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, let's take high blood pressure, for example. Very common manifestation in mold is high blood pressure. So patient goes in, doctor says, oh, we need to control that blood pressure. Here's hydrochlorothiazide, a very common diuretic. Well, that particular diuretic causes suppression of vitamin B1 uptake into cardiac cells. So although it may lower your blood volume and subsequently lower your blood pressure, it's actually inducing vitamin B1 deficiency, which will cause beriberi, which will cause your blood pressure to go back up, will cause congestive heart failure. So you can't, there's not a trade-off. And so you have to understand that if you are taking medicine to suppress your symptoms, your medicine is ultimately going to create a new series of problems that then get diagnosed as a new disease that then gets added to with a new medication. Now you're stuck in this pharmaceutical rat race where you're not going to get healthy. So, you have to step back from that. Sometimes it's kind of scary because when you've been diagnosed with something and the doctor's looking at you and saying, you have rheumatoid arthritis, if you don't take this biologic, you're going to be in a wheelchair in 5 years. You're not a doctor, you're not trained, you don't have any experience with any of that. You're just trusting that that doctor knows what's best for you. It's a scary thing to step back and say, maybe that guy's wrong. Maybe I shouldn't really take that drug. I would encourage anyone watching this just to think about medicine empirically. We spend more money, vastly more money than any country in the world, and we have the poorest health as it relates to chronic disease. So how are we right? And so sometimes it's just looking at outcomes. Don't look at it too deep, don't overthink it, but just look at the outcome. If we're doing these things and we're the sickest nation on earth amongst other industrialized countries, then shouldn't we step back and maybe reevaluate what it is that we're doing? And this is the revolution that's happening right now in our country. We are moving toward, let's ask a deeper question. Let's ask a different question. Doctor, why do I have high blood pressure? Not what can I take? What can I be victimized to take for the rest of my life? And so this requires ownership. People call me the gluten-free warrior, mold warrior, but you have to own yourself. Yeah. And if you don't own yourself, somebody else will own you. It's a form of slavery when you can't function in this world without going to fill your prescription. You are a slave to that. And if you want to be healthy, it requires work, it requires diligence, it requires thinking, it requires action. And when it comes to mold, it requires enough bravery to say, yes, my house may have this problem. I can't ignore it. Mold can kill you. It can cause cancer. I have seen, of all the things I've seen patients die from, this is probably the most insidious. And you have to understand that. A lot of people get offended. I'm a great housekeeper. There's no way my house could have mold. It has nothing to do with how well you keep house. It has only to do with, was your house constructed properly? Is there water damage? Is there water intrusion that's allowing for that mold to grow? And that's a question that's very complicated. But if you have the right thoughts, if you suspect mold and you bring in the right team, you can find it before it takes your whole family out. It almost took my whole family out. My wife almost died. My dog died. My son was sick with rashes and fevers. I was weeping like a baby some days because my emotions were all over the place. It's a horrible, horrible travesty to be in mold. And so many families are, but they just have so many different diagnoses they've been given. And so they don't even think mold because, again, they own that disease. They own the thyroid. They own the skin disease. They own the asthma. And then they proceed to treat those things. But again, if your family is really sick or even kind of sick and everybody's a little sick, look at mold, look for mold. If you have an autoimmune diagnosis, look for mold. 100% mold causes autoimmune disease. I used to treat a lot of people and their gluten sensitivity and their autoimmune disease. And what we found was there's a percentage. I no longer see these people anymore because most people that come to me now have changed their diet. Like diet change, I'm sure you've talked about this, but if you are grain-free, sugar-free, dairy-free, GMO-free, not pumping yourself with seed oils, eating organic, grass-fed, free-range organic, getting good sunshine, getting good sleep, doing all those things and you're still sick, you are in mold, most likely, and you better go hunt it down.
Amen. I think that there's a lot of people out there who make this initial discovery of, oh, shoot, mold may be a part of the picture for me, or my house may be moldy. And then there's this huge chasm between that awareness that is so hard won, because it can take years or even decades to figure out that it's a part of your health issue, between that and resolution. And I think part of that is because there's a major, like a passivity that becomes with mold toxicity. There's been a lot of study and research about how different fungi and different mycotoxins can actually induce passive behavior in people, right? And I see it all the time in people who have mold exposure, and then they wait and wait and wait to do something about it. And I think part of that is that nervous system overload because it's so hard on the nervous system. It's directly neurotoxic. Different mold species have different mycotoxins that have, as you so well know, these different types of damage that can happen to the body. Citrullins hard on the kidneys, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at how mold directly attacks the nervous system and can distort your emotions and actually induce this kind of passive behavior, it's easy for people to feel overwhelmed or like this is too hard, especially because mold is, shutting down the mitochondria. And so right when you need energy the most, because you have to rise to the occasion to be your own advocate in a system that is not set up to let you, to rise to the occasion to do your mold mitigation, you don't have the energy to do that. The part that I really want you to speak into about this is there's a weird nervous system influencer backlash going on right now. Have you seen this where life coaches and therapists who want to talk about the nervous system and how profound it is to work with the nervous system, and use nervous system supportive tools are extremely dismissive of mold detox. And they're pointing at mold detoxes that didn't work or how people felt worse on mold detoxes, not better. Can you speak to this gap in clinical knowledge? Like, how do we get people through that? Because the last thing I want to see is people figuring out this issue and then getting stuck and being like, oh, well, I guess I just have to positive think my way through this because mold detox doesn't work.
You can't positive think your way through mold.
Yeah.
My wife is I would say, a very positive person. She didn't tell me this until we were out of the mold, but she said, there were so many days where we were in that house that I imagined just going outside on my knees and just blowing my brains out. You can't positive your way out of that. Now, she was never suicidal. She just became so apathetic about life that she didn't want to be here anymore. Again, you can't positive your way out of that kind of a situation. So it's not to say that people shouldn't be trying to retrain their negative emotions and their negative loops. But if you're still in mold, I will say this, all the brain care in the world is not really going to be super effective. There's a right way and a wrong way to detox a person in mold. The vast majority of failed detoxification cases, they didn't fail because detox doesn't work. They failed because they probably weren't working with somebody who was adamant and diligent and enough of a beast to have the courage to tell that patient, your remediation failed. I understand that it's expensive and that you're struggling and that you're frustrated, but I'm not going to have you spend a bunch of money on a bunch of products to detox when I know that your remediation failed, or when I know that your mold inspection sucked. It was a 3-page report of some jerk who took a weekend class who doesn't know what he's doing, who came in and told you that you don't have mold. And it gave you some relief because you couldn't fathom having to deal with that. I get all that. There's a psychology, deep psychology with mold, but brutal truth is the only way forward. And the only way you get out of mold is you first have to identify it, then you have to identify why, then you have to fix the why, then you have to remove the mold properly through good remediation technique, then you have to clean the air through something called fine particle remediation. Then you have to think about, do I keep grandma's Afghan and do I keep this and do I keep that? Is it worth bringing that stuff back into my house that I've just paid thousands of dollars to remediate? You have to do all those things before you can detox. And there are too many unethical practitioners that are out there that are telling people. I had a patient in my office last week. She had some of the highest mycotoxin levels that anyone's ever brought to me. Her doctor was detoxing her, but never told her to get a mold inspection. This is part of the problem, right? So you have, it's not to pick on the coaches that are out there trying to retrain people's brains, because I think there's a good place for us all to be helping patients.
Those tools can be profound, but
Yes.
it's insane to think that a body under attack should just ignore being attacked. That's the
Yes.
same as a pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not okay.
So the thing is that your body is so giftedly intelligent that it is not going to let you stay in an environment that is a threat to you without throwing alarm bells. That's what it's supposed to do. Like, that's what being in tune is. It's recognizing that, oh, that's not an ache or a pain that we're going to diagnose. That's your body saying, do it differently. And if you shut that down or suppress it, or you try to mind over matter it, I mean, that's not to say there aren't people that have had spontaneous healing and spontaneous remission. We don't know everything, but if you're in mold, you're not going to positive your way out of it. You've got to find the mold. You've got to remove the mold before you try to detox your body from, any potential toxins that you were exposed to or that were embedded in your tissue. There's a proper order to things. And unfortunately, in the mold community, postgraduately speaking for doctors, there's a few different groups that I think do a pretty good job of bringing awareness and education to physicians and doctors.
Do you want to name a couple here?
So there's ISEAI, and there's the Sears group. And they have different approaches and different opinions. For what it's worth, not everybody agrees with this group and not everybody agrees with that group, which is fine. That's true in every group. But they're doing a great job of bringing awareness and education and asking deeper questions so that doctors can get better at understanding the scope of this illness. But they're relatively new, and we're kind of at the whisper stage, right? So you remember when gluten was like relatively unknown 20 plus years ago?
What's gluten?
All of a sudden, there was a handful of doctors taking patients gluten-free and writing books about it. William Davis wrote Wheat Belly and
Your amazing book,
Perlmutter,
No Grain, No Pain.
No Grain, No Pain. That gluten at first was like a little whisper. Today, what is it? There's not a grocery store in the country that doesn't have a gluten-free aisle. There's not a person in the modern world that doesn't or hasn't heard the term gluten, whether they agree with it or not. My point is the awareness is there. And we're at that early whisper stage right now with mold, that it's going to become a roar. Well, there's an awakening happening right now in our country where people are fed up with being fed poison. We've got great folks like Vani Hari, who's out there, Food Babe, doing great work. RFK and the whole political movement's doing great work to bring awareness. And I think families are sick, and they're sick of being sick, and they don't know why. And when they go to their doctor and they ask a question and they get insulted, I think they're kind of tired of that. Doctors are no longer on that immortalized pedestal of yes, doctor, yes, doctor, yes, doctor. Now it's more like, I'm not going to let you treat me like that, and I'm not going to let you gaslight me. That's the trend that we're waking up to today. And I think with that revolution of food change, we're going to see mold come more to the forefront because people are changing their diet. People are recognizing they can't eat, fried chicken nuggets and French fries and drink soda and be healthy, right? So there's that awareness. And because of that awareness, they're also realizing I've got to exercise and probably should get some sunshine and go to bed on time. And I should probably have some peace in my life and have some practices that bring me peace in my life. That awareness is going to shed the light on mold even more, simply because as people do those things and still feel sick, now what? There's 6 fundamentals, 6 things that this audience can be, and any audience can be empowered to do. So if you are trying to be healthy, I call that these things are not negotiable, not because I said so, but because your body won't work well if you're not doing these 6 things. Eat real food, that's easy. Go to bed on time. Get some sunshine every day. Exercise. Drink clean water. And breathe clean air. And when your house and the air in your house is killing you, and you're doing all 6 of those things to the best of your ability, that's when you need to start looking for mold.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks for spending this time with us today. I know these conversations can bring up a lot, and I want you to have room to sit with what you learned and let it land in your own body. If you want more support or you're curious about the next step on your healing path, you can always connect with me. Find me on Instagram at @TheDetoxNation and explore resources mentioned in this episode at detoxnation.com. This conversation is shared for education and personal reflection and isn't medical advice. Please always work with your trusted healthcare providers for your care. I'm really glad you're here, and I'll see you in the next episode.